Welcome to my review for X the Unknown, not to be confused or associated with the Quatermass Experiment, which came out a year before this and was also produced by Hammer. Both films have an X in their titles, but they are completely separate from each other. X the Unknown, I guess, was Hammer's attempts at replicating the success of Quatermass. This is another sci-fi horror film. It again featured a dangerous alien, albeit this time one that comes up through the crust of the Earth's surface rather than down from space. This one was directed by Leslie Norman, who I've honestly never heard of, and looking at his filmography, I'm not familiar with any of his work. And to be honest, I'm not familiar with any of the actors in this film either. It's just going a bit too far back for me. The lead is called Dean Jagger. Apparently he was an Oscar winner coming into this film, so at least one actor came into this with some degree of pedigree, and by accounts, Jagger was paid a substantial amount of this film's budget in order to be in it. He looks about 60 in this film, which is not the common thing for the lead in a horror film, although to my surprise, when I looked further into this, it turns out he was only about 52, 53 when they did the filming. But given the fact that the leading man in Quatermass was also clearly in his 50s, I'm starting to realise as I go through these films that it clearly wasn't a prerequisite for actors in the 1950s, if they wanted to take on a starring role in a horror film, to be young, handsome, and in their 20s. Those are just the way things were back then. There's also not much of a female presence in this film. I only counted 2 female roles, both of which only last for about one scene. One of those women is a nurse character who is sleeping with a doctor, despite the fact that she knows that this doctor has been sleeping with a lot of the other nurses as well. So not only is there hardly any female presence in this, but the women who are in it are not exactly shown to be in a great light. Again, just the way things were back then. So in terms of the story, I've already said that this is about an alien that comes up through the crust of the Earth's surface. It only comes out once every 50 years. It's later explained in the story. So it's a bit like Pennywise the Clown, except with a longer hibernation period. Luckily, though, it doesn't feed on people. It feeds on radioactive sources to get its sustenance. So at one point in this story, it goes off to a power station. At another point, it goes off to a science lab. Given the fact that it first comes up through the surface in a quarry in Scotland, I guess it's lucky to find any food within about 1,000 miles. But just because it doesn't eat people, that doesn't mean that people don't die violent deaths in this film, because this being a horror film, people still throw themselves in its way. And if it has to kill, which it does several times over during this, it's very vicious. It gives out some kind of radioactive blast, which will either instantly fry people to death, or even if they get away, they'll still die later on from radioactive burns. I have to say, I didn't quite enjoy this film as much as Quatermass, even though this is an okay film. I didn't find the creature as fascinating. To look at, it sort of reminds me of The Blob. Now, I quite enjoyed the 1988 version of The Blob, but I didn't really have any desire to go and watch a 1950s version with lesser effects. You get to see the creature a lot in the second half of this film, but I didn't really enjoy the moments where you could see the creature. It's not that the effects are bad in this. I mean, it's all done with miniatures. I think what they've done is they've taken like tubs of slime and just poured it over like toy cars and buildings and pretended that it's all lifelike. And for the most part, they've done a good job with that stuff. The reason why I didn't enjoy seeing the creature is just that it was really icky to see it kind of moving around. It just made me want to turn away and think to myself, just come on, go to the next scene. I felt like I would if someone had been in the room with me and had picked their nose and kind of left it on their nostril. I would have had the exact same reaction. I just would have been like, yeah, okay, just, let's not do that. The real fun of X the Unknown is in the detective work done by Royston, watching him go about his business, putting the pieces together, all the stuff to do with the actual deaths and people escaping out the back of power stations because the creature was in the vicinity. That stuff, not as enjoyable, but watching the core mystery being solved was quite fun. I say that despite the fact that Royston as a character is really not that exciting. He's just a little bit bland. I much preferred the chap from Quatermass, even though he himself was not exactly a comedian. Royston is sort of like a Watson sort of character, but without the Sherlock to play off. I kind of feel like this film could have done with somebody like Peter Cushing's Sherlock going around being all excitable, and then Royston, played by Jagger, could have been the calmer sort of backup character. But as it is, we've just got Royston, and like I said, he's a little bit bland. But I did enjoy the mystery in this. The creature feels quite original to me, even though I didn't necessarily enjoy seeing it. It's quite funny in the first half of the film because at that point we're not seeing the creature yet. So it's like the director's told everybody who dies, look, we can't see the creature in this scene, so you're really going to have to sell this. So just try and look as scared as you possibly can. And all the actors tend to do something like this. They really stretch their facial muscles to try and appear as scared as possible. And that hurt me, what I just did. So I hope those actors didn't have to do too many takes. One part of the plot that confused me is that at one point, Royston goes into the woods and he comes across this shack. It's a good atmospheric setup, this scene. I thought he might come across the creature in the attic of this shack. What he actually finds is a container on a bookshelf that scares him. He really reacts to this thing. He's like, whoa! And I thought to myself, what is it about this container? Now, it turns out that the creature stole this container from Royston's office, and then Royston himself has accidentally stumbled across the container in the woods much later on, as unlikely as that seems. But for some reason, the creature didn't just go into this container and suck out the radioactive material and leave the container. For some reason, the creature has taken the container with it and then disposed of it in the woods. But this just led to a confusing moment in the film where I couldn't understand why Royston was getting all riled up about this container. I actually had to rewind the film for 5 minutes, and because I thought I might have missed something. Maybe I'd nodded off for a couple of minutes, but not so. But that's the only part of the plot which was a little bit weird. I think they should have just had the creature leave the container in the lab, because the rest of the plot is honestly quite tight. Hands down, the best one scene in this film is when one of Royston's colleagues gets lowered down into the original fissure from which the creature sprang from. Nobody knows how far this crack in the earth goes down, although at one point somebody tries to throw like a stone in there and they can't hear the moment that the stone lands. So it really boggles my mind as to how deep this crack is. Conceivably, it could go all the way down into the center of the earth, because if we do refer to this creature as a version of the Blob, then it's very much a radioactive molten lava variant of it. So I could imagine that it could survive down in the very center of the earth where there supposedly is lots of lava. The moment when the character is being lowered on the harness is a moment of real high tension. I mean, if that rope goes, God knows how long he would be falling. When I put myself in his shoes and imagine what it would be like to be slowly lowered down into the darkness, and up above you can just see the speck of light getting smaller and smaller, that would be quite frightening, very claustrophobic. I do wonder whether the third act of this film might have been better served by expanding on this scene a bit and having Royston come down on the wire and get trapped in a cave somehow, or a network of caves, and then he'd get to see the origin of the creature. Or would that be explaining it too much? I guess in that set of circumstances I would have to look at the creature a lot more than I already do. So I don't know, it's not like the ending as is, it is bad. Now, I've also got to say in this review, before I forget, that there is a big danger to kids in this film. I didn't expect that coming into it, but there's one kid who gets brutally killed, not in a quick, clean way either. He gets these radioactive burns, which means he's suffering in a hospital bed for hours on end. There's another kid who almost gets swarmed by the creature in a graveyard. This one kid is just stood in front of a grave at 9 o'clock at night in the dark, which is a little bit bizarre, but this guy, or girl, I'm not sure if it's a girl or a boy, survives anyway. So yeah, just because this is a sci-fi film in black and white in the 1950s doesn't mean that it's completely family friendly or anything like that. Although you could argue that these kids maybe do deserve to die because their Scottish accents are so bad. This film is set in Scotland for some reason, but the accents are hit and miss throughout the movie. Some actors just don't even try and just speak in their native English or American. I guess in the case of the army soldiers who are doing their radioactivity experiments in the beginning of the film, they've got the excuse that probably they're based in England and they've just gone up to Scotland for the training exercise. Although that begs the question, why would they not just do the training exercise in England? Although I'm probably overthinking this particular element. Before I get on and give you my score for this, I'll quickly show you the version of the film that I own. I bought this a couple of weeks ago for the absolutely fantastic price of £6. I mean, I know it's only a DVD, but the picture and audio quality on this is absolutely terrific. I don't think they do a Blu-ray for X the Unknown in my region. Also included on this release is an audio commentary featuring none other than Jimmy Sangster himself, the man who wrote countless Hammer films in the 50s and 60s. I believe X the Unknown was the first one he ever did, and his memories of the film are absolutely razor sharp on this track. I think he would have recorded it around about 2002, 2003 if we go on the release date of the DVD, but it's a fascinating listen to. Also included in the box, and I didn't know I was getting this when I bought this on eBay, a 24-page booklet featuring all sorts of stories from about the film and pictures and stuff. This is the sort of thing that you normally only get in the really limited edition Blu-ray sets that are really expensive. So I was really thrilled to find out that that came with the DVD when I opened it up. Right, let's get to the bag of terror then and find out what sort of score we're going to give for this. So we've got 1, 2, 2.5 bloody axes out of 5. That's my average score. Not bad, not great. I sort of enjoyed this film, but compared to Quatermass, which came out the year before this one, and is a very similar type of film, I absolutely preferred that to this, but this was all right, and it will still take pride of place on my shelf. And so there we have it. So I'll be back very soon with another Hammer review. Until next time, cheerio.